welcome to this deep dive. You wanted to get a grip on core Buddhist ideas, and you gave us some incredible stuff to work with. We even have audio from the Dalai Lama and excerpts from all sorts of scholarly texts. It's going to be fascinating.
It is quite a combo. Hearing the Dalai Lama himself, it just adds that personal touch, and the scholarly stuff gives us that extra layer of analysis.
Okay, so our mission, if you will, for this deep dive is to really get to the heart of key Buddhist concepts.
Yeah.
Like the Four Noble Truths, dependent origination, emptiness.
Yeah.
And for me, what I'm really curious about is how these ideas can be applied to our everyday lives.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the most powerful things about Buddhist thought. It's practicality. It's not just philosophy. It's tools for living a better life.
Right. So where do we even begin with something as vast as Buddhist thought?
Well, Buddhism starts by acknowledging something we all experience: suffering.
Okay.
And I don't just mean like physical pain or heartbreak, but a broader sense of unease that kind of permeates our lives.
This always makes me think about how I get caught up in wanting things to be different, like wishing away a bad day or clinging to a moment of happiness. Is that what Buddhism would consider suffering?
It definitely touches upon it. Buddhism suggests that a lot of our suffering comes from this constant grasping and resisting of our experience. It's like we're fighting against the natural flow of life.
So it's not about just avoiding pain. It's about understanding the nature of our experience and how we're kind of contributing to our own suffering.
Exactly. And Buddhism doesn't just stop at acknowledging suffering, it offers a path to its cessation. And that path starts with understanding the Four Noble Truths.
Okay, I've heard of the Four Noble Truths, but they've always seemed a bit abstract to me. How can we think about them in a way that's, relevant to our lives?
Think of it like a doctor diagnosing an illness and then prescribing a treatment. The first noble truth simply states that suffering exists.
Okay.
Recognizing that reality, that we do experience this unease.
Okay, yeah, I can relate to that. What about the second noble truth?
The second noble truth digs into the causes of suffering. Buddhism says that suffering arises from clinging to our desires, clinging to our aversions, and ultimately to a sense of self that we believe is solid and permanent.
I can see how clinging to a sense of self that's constantly changing could create a lot of internal conflict.
It does, and this clinging is fueled by ignorance, a fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of reality.
Okay.
We perceive things as solid and separate when in truth everything's interconnected and impermanent.
This is where it starts to get really mind-bending for me. So if the second noble truth is about the cause of suffering, what does the third noble truth tell us?
The third noble truth offers hope. It states that suffering can cease. Just like a doctor can cure an illness, Buddhism offers a path to liberation from this cycle of suffering.
That's a powerful idea, that we're not doomed to suffer forever, so the fourth noble truth must be the treatment plan, right?
It is. The fourth noble truth outlines the path to liberation, which is known as the Eightfold Path. It's a set of guidelines for cultivating wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline.
So it's not just about understanding suffering. It's about, actually engaging in practices that can lead to its cessation.
Precisely. And a central principle that underpins the Four Noble Truths, and indeed all of Buddhist thought, is the concept of dependent origination.
Dependent origination. That's one of those concepts I've heard thrown around but haven't fully grasped. What does it actually mean?
In essence, dependent origination is the idea that nothing exists in isolation. Everything arises in dependence upon other things, a web of interconnected causes and conditions.
So it's like a giant cosmic domino effect. One thing leads to another, and so on.
That's a good way to visualize it.
Yeah.
But it's not just a linear chain of cause and effect. It's much more intricate and dynamic web of relationships.
Okay. I'm starting to see how this challenges our usual way of thinking. We tend to see things as separate and independent, but dependent origination suggests that everything's interconnected.
Exactly, and this applies to everything: our thoughts, feelings, actions, relationships, even our sense of self. The Dalai Lama has said that even our bodies and minds are not permanent entities, but constantly changing processes, arising and dissolving in dependence upon countless factors.
That's a pretty radical idea. So if everything is interdependent, what does that mean for our sense of self?
It means that the self we cling to, the me we think is solid and independent, is actually a construct, an illusion created by the interplay of various factors.
I can see how that could be unsettling for some people. The idea that our sense of self isn't as solid and permanent as we think it is.
It can be challenging, but it's also incredibly liberating, because when we let go of this illusion of a separate self, We open ourselves up to a deeper sense of connection with everything around us.
Wow, that's a lot to process. So dependent origination is basically saying that everything is interconnected, impermanent, and ultimately empty of inherent existence.
You got it. And that brings us to another core Buddhist concept, emptiness.
Emptiness is the one that always seems to trip people up. It sounds kind of negative, like nihilism, the idea that nothing matters.
It's definitely one of the most misunderstood concepts in Buddhism, but emptiness doesn't mean that things don't exist. It means they don't exist in the way we usually think they do.
Okay. So if things do exist, but not in the way we typically think, then how do they exist?
Imagine a rainbow. It's beautiful and vibrant and seemingly solid, but if you try to grasp it, it disappears.
So it's like the rainbow exists, but it doesn't have a solid, independent reality. It depends on specific conditions to arise.
Exactly, and that's what emptiness points to. The lack of inherent, independent existence in anything, including ourselves. Things exist, but they exist in dependence upon other things. They're impermanent, fluid, and interconnected, like that rainbow.
This is where I really have to concentrate. So how does understanding emptiness, this lack of inherent existence, actually help us in our lives? What's the practical application?
That's a great question, and we'll dive deeper into that in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay. I'm already feeling like I'm expanding my understanding of how reality works.
Understanding emptiness can be a real game changer.
Yeah.
It's like putting on a new pair of glasses that helps you see the world without all those distortions, without the clinging and grasping.
So instead of being so fixated on things being a certain way, emptiness kind of helps us to embrace the fluid and interconnected nature of reality.
Exactly. And that can bring a sense of freedom, even in the face of difficult experiences. But it's not always easy to grasp, this concept of emptiness. Even the Buddha himself, he was hesitant to teach it directly because it's so easily misunderstood.
Yeah, the scholarly sources that we have mention that emptiness doesn't mean that nothing matters.
Right.
It's more about understanding that things don't have this fixed, independent existence.
Absolutely. It's more about recognizing that everything is in the state of constant flux and interdependence. The Dalai Lama often uses the analogy of a chariot to explain this.
Oh, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about the chariot analogy.
So think about a chariot. We label it as one thing. But if you break it down, it's really just a collection of parts. Wheels, axles, a seat.
Right.
There's no inherent chariotness apart from those parts.
So it's like a label we give to a collection of components, but that label doesn't point to some independent entity.
That's the point. And this applies to everything, even ourselves. We have this strong sense of self, a me, but if we look closely, that me is just a label for a collection of constantly changing physical and mental processes.
Okay, I see what you mean. It's like when I look back at old photos of myself and think, wow, I was so different back then. It's a reminder that even our sense of self is impermanent, always evolving.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And recognizing this lack of inherent existence, this emptiness, is what frees us from clinging and grasping. It allows us to see things as they truly are, without the distortions of our preconceptions and attachment.
So it's not about rejecting our experience or pretending that things don't exist.
No.
It's more about seeing through the illusion of solidity and permanence.
Yes, and that clear seeing allows us to engage with the world in a more skillful and compassionate way.
Okay, I'm starting to see the practical benefits of this way of thinking. But I have to admit, it's a lot to wrap my head around.
It is. And the Dalai Lama emphasizes that it's a lifelong journey.
Right.
A process of continuous learning and growth.
Speaking of journeys, earlier we talked about the 12 links of dependent origination as like a map of how suffering arises.
Yeah.
I'm still a bit fuzzy on how that all works. Can we unpack that a bit more?
Absolutely. The 12 links can be thought of as this chain reaction that perpetuates the cycle of suffering, but they also highlight points where we can break free from that cycle.
I think I get the chain reaction part. It's like how one bad habit can lead to another, and before you know it, you're stuck in this pattern you can't seem to break.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
And in Buddhist thought, the first link in this chain is ignorance, a fundamental misperception of reality.
This makes me think about all those times I've made choices based on like assumptions or misunderstandings and how those choices have led to, sometimes painful consequences.
That's how ignorance operates. And from ignorance arises volitional actions, the choices we make based on that flawed understanding.
So our actions, driven by ignorance, plant these karmic seeds that shape our future experiences.
Yes, and those seeds lead to consciousness.
Okay.
The third link. Consciousness takes on a particular form based on the karmic imprints we've accumulated.
It's like those imprints color our perceptions and shape the way we experience the world.
Exactly. And that leads to the fourth link, name, and form.
Okay.
This is where our individual being takes shape,
Uh-huh.
the coming together of mental and physical elements.
And from there, we develop the six senses, right?
Yes.
Sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and mental perception.
Yeah.
That's link number 5.
Yes. And those six senses allow us to make contact with the external world. That contact gives rise to feeling, the sixth link, which includes both pleasant and unpleasant sensations.
And it's those feelings experienced through the lens of ignorance that lead to craving.
The seventh link.
We grasp at what feels good and push away what feels bad.
And that craving intensifies into grasping the eighth link,
Okay.
a more solidified form of clinging.
Right.
We become attached to pleasurable experiences and averse to unpleasant ones.
So we're no longer just experiencing the feelings. We're actually actively trying to hold on to the good ones and get rid of the bad ones.
Exactly. And that grasping then solidifies into becoming the ninth link. This is the karmic force that propels us into future lives.
So our actions and attachments create this momentum that carries us forward, shaping our future experiences.
That's the idea. And that becoming leads to birth.
The 10th link. The 10th link birth isn't just physical birth. It's the arising of a new life experience within the cycle of samsara.
It's like a new chapter in the ongoing story of our lives.
And of course, birth inevitably leads to aging and death.
Right.
The final 2 links in the chain. It's a poignant reminder of the impermanence of all things.
This all paints a pretty bleak picture. It's like we're caught in this endless cycle of suffering, driven by, ignorance and craving.
Yep.
It can seem that way. But remember, dependent origination doesn't just describe how suffering arises. It also points to the possibility of liberation.
So it's not just a cycle of doom and gloom. There's hope.
Absolutely. The beauty of dependent origination is that it also shows us how we can break free from this cycle. By interrupting the chain at any point, we can disrupt the flow of suffering.
That's a huge relief. But how do we actually break the chain? Where do we even begin?
That's where the practices of the Eightfold Path come in. By cultivating wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline, we can weaken the links in the chain, ultimately leading to its dissolution.
I'm starting to see how everything we've been discussing connects.
Yeah.
The Four Noble Truths, dependent origination, emptiness, the Eightfold Path is all part of this framework for understanding suffering and finding liberation.
You're getting it. And understanding emptiness is particularly crucial because it helps us to see through the illusions that keep us bound to the cycle of suffering.
So it's like emptiness is the master key that unlocks the door to freedom.
That's a great way to put it. By recognizing that things lack inherent existence, we loosen the grip of our attachments and aversions. We become less reactive, less caught up in the drama of our thoughts and emotions.
It's like we're creating space within ourselves,
Yeah.
allowing us to respond to life's challenges with more wisdom and compassion.
Exactly. And that space, that freedom, is what allows true happiness to emerge.
So it sounds like understanding emptiness is kind of this process of letting go, letting go of our fixed ideas about ourselves and the world, even letting go of our attachments to, things being a certain way.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's about releasing that tight grip we have on our experiences and allowing ourselves to flow with the ever-changing nature of reality.
That reminds me of something the Dalai Lama said in the audio clip. He talked about happiness being the purpose of life. But I think a lot of people associate happiness with, getting what they want, not letting go of things.
That's a common misconception. True happiness, in the Buddhist view, isn't about accumulating possessions or achieving external goals. It's about cultivating a deep sense of inner peace and well-being that's not dependent on those external circumstances.
So it's like a kind of happiness that can't be taken away from you, even when things are tough.
Exactly. And this type of happiness is rooted in wisdom and compassion, two qualities that are cultivated through the practices of the Eightfold Path.
Earlier, we were talking about how, clinging and grasping lead to suffering. So if happiness is about letting go, it seems like the Eightfold Path is giving us like a roadmap for how to do that.
It is. The Eightfold Path is like a toolkit for transforming our minds and our lives. It includes guidelines for right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. Can you give me an example of how one of these aspects of the Eightfold Path could help someone, cultivate more happiness?
Let's take right mindfulness. This is all about cultivating a present moment awareness of our thoughts, feelings, and sensations without judgment.
I've tried mindfulness meditation before, but I always get distracted by my thoughts. Is that normal?
It's completely normal. The mind is like a wild monkey, constantly jumping from branch to branch. The key with mindfulness isn't to stop thinking altogether, but to simply observe our thoughts without getting carried away by them.
So it's more about creating space between ourselves and our thoughts rather than trying to, like, control them.
Precisely. And as we develop this capacity for mindful awareness, we start to notice the patterns of our mind, how we tend to react to certain situations, how we cling to certain thoughts or emotions.
And that awareness allows us to make different choices,
Right.
to respond to those challenges in a more skillful way.
Exactly. And as we cultivate mindfulness, we naturally start to develop more compassion for ourselves and others.
Speaking of compassion, the Dalai Lama talked about bodhicitta, that aspiration to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. That seems like a pretty lofty goal. Is that something that's, attainable for ordinary people?
Bodhicitta may seem like a far-off ideal, but it's something we can cultivate gradually in our everyday lives. It starts with recognizing our interconnectedness, understanding that our happiness is intertwined with the happiness of others.
This makes me think about how much joy I get from helping others. Whether it's like a small act of kindness or volunteering my time for a cause I care about.
That's a great example. When we act with kindness and generosity, we're not only benefiting others, but we're also cultivating those qualities within ourselves.
So it's like a win-win situation. You make the world a better place.
Yeah.
And we also experience more happiness in our own lives.
Exactly. And this is where the understanding of karma comes into play.
Okay, karma is another one of those concepts that can be a bit confusing.
Yeah.
Can you explain how it relates to happiness and bodhicitta?
In Buddhism, karma isn't about punishment or reward. It's simply about cause and effect. Every action we take creates an imprint on our consciousness, shaping our future experiences.
So if we act with kindness and compassion, we're creating the conditions for more happiness and well-being, both for ourselves and, everyone around us.
That's the idea. And conversely, if we act out of greed, hatred, or delusion, we're creating the conditions for more suffering.
This makes me think about, like, the ripple effect, how even small actions can have far-reaching consequences.
That's a good way to think about it. We're all interconnected, and our actions, no matter how small, have an impact on the web of life.
So cultivating bodhicitta, that aspiration to benefit all beings, isn't just, a nice sentiment. It's a way of living that creates a more harmonious and joyful world for everyone.
That's the heart of Buddhist thought and practice. It's about recognizing our interconnectedness, cultivating wisdom and compassion, and living in a way that benefits all beings.
Wow, this deep dive has been a truly enlightening experience. I feel like I have a much deeper understanding of these profound ideas and, even more importantly, a sense of how I can apply them to my own life.
I'm glad to hear that. Remember, understanding these concepts is a lifelong journey, and it's a journey that's filled with both challenges and incredible rewards. What stands out to you as something you'd like to, delve deeper into?
I'm really curious to learn more about the Eightfold Path and how I can, actually integrate those practices into my daily life. It feels like there's so much to discover, and I'm excited to continue exploring this path.
That's wonderful. Remember, the path is always there for you. And as you continue to walk it, you'll undoubtedly find that the more you learn, the more you realize how much there is still to learn.
Well, it's like the Dalai Lama said, the purpose of life is to be happy. And it seems like the Buddhist path offers a really profound and practical way to achieve that happiness, not just for ourselves, but for all beings. So thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive, and thank you for listening.